She stood in my kitchen on Thanksgiving morning holding a glass of orange juice like she owned the place, which, as far as she knew, she did, and told me I needed to find somewhere else to live. Not asked. Told. My daughter-in-law, 34 years old, wearing a silk robe I'd never seen before, hair still messy from sleep. My son was somewhere behind her, sitting at the counter with his coffee, not looking at me. "Dad," he finally said without looking up, "Becca's right, it's not working out." I stood there for a moment. I remember the smell of the coffee. I remember the morning light coming through the window over the sink, the window I'd installed myself 11 years ago when this house was nothing but a fixer-upper I'd bought for $43,000 in a neighborhood nobody wanted. "Not working out," I repeated. He finally looked at me. "You've been out of work for 4 months, you don't contribute, and honestly, Dad, we need our space." 4 months. That's what it came down to. 38 years of working, of building, of putting everything I had into this family, and 4 months without a paycheck turned me into a liability. What my son didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I hadn't lost my job. I'd retired, quietly, deliberately, and what I'd been doing for those 4 months had nothing to do with being unemployed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got here. My name is Walter. I'm 66 years old. I worked in commercial real estate for most of my adult life. Not the flashy kind you see on TV, not flipping mansions or staging open houses. The unglamorous kind. Industrial properties, warehouses, long-term lease negotiations for companies that needed loading docks and cold storage. Not exciting, but steady. And over 35 years, steadier than anyone around me ever realized. My wife, Helen, passed 8 years ago. Ovarian cancer. It was fast 14 months from diagnosis to the end, and it rearranged everything I thought I knew about the future. We'd had plans. Travel. A little place in coastal Maine we'd talked about for years. None of it happened the way we'd imagined. After she was gone, I threw myself back into work. That's what men of my generation do. You grieve by doing. You fill the silence with purpose. My son, Travis, was 26 when his mother died, already with Becca by then. They got married 2 years later, and I helped with the wedding, not because they asked, but because that's what you do. $50,000 toward a venue in Scottsdale they'd had their hearts set on. I didn't mention the number. I wrote the check and showed up in a suit and danced badly at the reception, and I felt Helen's absence like a missing tooth the whole night. The house came 3 years after the wedding. Travis and Becca were renting in Phoenix, and they found a place in Tempe they loved. 4 bedrooms, good school district for the grandchildren they were always saying were coming soon. The price was $380,000. They had $40,000 saved. I bought the house? Not as a gift, exactly. Travis and I had an informal arrangement. They'd pay what they would have paid in rent, $1,800 a month, and I'd hold the deed. No interest. No pressure. It was family. It was what Helen would have wanted. What I didn't tell Travis was that I'd paid cash. There was no mortgage, no bank. The $1,800 a month they paid me every month went into an account I never touched. This is the part where I should explain something about how I'd lived my life. I drove a 24 F-150. I wore the same 6 or 7 outfits on rotation. I ate at diners, not restaurants. I'd spent 35 years quietly accumulating, reinvesting, compounding. And somewhere along the way, the numbers had grown so large that I genuinely stopped paying close attention to them. My financial advisor, a calm woman named Patricia who worked out of a Scottsdale office, sent me quarterly statements that I'd glance at and file away. I trusted her. She'd been cautious and consistent, and what I had was the result of 3.5 decades of boring, disciplined decisions. I'm not going to tell you a precise number. That's not the point of this story. What I'll tell you is that when Travis called me in March and said Becca was pregnant, finally, after 4 years of trying, I felt something shift in me. A loosening, a sense that things were moving forward again. I decided to retire. I told no one. I finished out my last quarter, handed off my client files to a younger colleague, and walked out of my office building on a Friday afternoon in late June. I stopped at a Dairy Queen on the way home and got a Blizzard, which I ate in the parking lot like a man who had just become free. Then I started putting the next chapter together. For 4 months, I met with attorneys, estate planners, and Patricia. I restructured everything. I established trusts, one for Travis, one for the grandchild coming in February, and a separate one because I am nothing if not thorough, that I'd already named in honor of Helen. I bought a 2-bedroom condo in a building I'd been watching for years. Quiet, well-managed, 12 minutes from Travis's house, and I had it furnished. I paid cash. I started making lists of what I wanted the next decade to look like. None of this looked like anything from the outside. I was a 66-year-old man driving around Tempe in a 2014 truck, wearing jeans and a Henley, apparently doing nothing. And then Thanksgiving came. I'd brought 2 pies, pumpkin and pecan, from a bakery I liked, and a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a good occasion. I showed up at 9 in the morning the way I always had, the way I'd done every Thanksgiving since Helen passed, ready to sit in the kitchen and stay out of the way and just be part of whatever noise and warmth was happening in that house. Becca was in the kitchen. Travis was at the counter, and in 60 seconds, I was told I needed to find somewhere else to live. I looked at my son. He looked briefly at me and then back at his coffee. "You can take your time," Becca said. "We're not trying to be cruel, but by the end of the month would be best." I thought about a lot of things in that moment. I thought about Helen and what she would have said. I thought about the deed in my name. I thought about the $1,800 a month sitting in an account they didn't know existed. I thought about the $43,000 I'd paid in 1998 for the lot this house was built on, and the permit I'd pulled for the addition in 2003 and the window over the sink. I picked up my pies. I picked up my wine. And I said very quietly, "Okay." That was it. No argument, no scene, no door slamming. I drove to my condo, let myself in, and stood in the living room for a long time, looking at the furniture I'd chosen, at the afternoon light coming through the sliding glass door that opened onto a small balcony, at the life I'd assembled in silence while my son had apparently been assembling a different story about who I was. Then I called Patricia. "Merry early Thanksgiving," I said. "Walter," she said, "what happened?" I told her. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I've always appreciated about her. When I finished, she said, "What do you want to do?" "I want to do what we talked about," I said. "Start the process, all of it." There was a pause. "All of it." "All of it," I said, "but patient, no rush. I want it to happen at its own pace." I should explain what all of it meant. The house in Tempe, the one Travis and Becca lived in, the one I held the deed to, I had been planning to transfer ownership to Travis as part of my estate plan. A gift, clean and simple. It had been on my list of things to finalize once the attorneys finished the trust documents. I took it off the list. Then there was the matter of the $1,800 a month. Travis and Becca had been paying it like clockwork, which I respected, but the payment went into an account at a bank they had no knowledge of, linked to nothing they could see. I didn't close that account, but I made a note. And then there was the business question. Travis was a project manager at a mid-sized construction firm in Phoenix, Henderson and Brook. He'd been there 6 years. He was good at his job, and he'd worked his way up to a senior position. He talked about the company often. He admired the founders. He had ambitions there. What Travis did not know was that Henderson and Brook had been looking for a silent capital partner for 2 years. They'd had a difficult stretch, a large municipal contract gone sideways, some cash flow trouble, and they'd approached several private investors. The firm that had brokered the conversation had called Patricia 18 months earlier. I had passed at the time. Too complicated, too close to home. I called the broker back the Monday after Thanksgiving. "Is that position still available?" I asked. It was. The next few weeks were quiet ones for me. I walked in the mornings. I cooked for myself, which I hadn't done properly in years. I read. I called my sister in Oregon. We talked for 2 hours, which was more than we'd talked in the previous year combined. I did not call Travis. He did not call me either. Becca texted once, a week after Thanksgiving. She said she hoped I'd found a comfortable place and that they'd love to have me for Christmas. I read the message twice. I put my phone face down on the kitchen counter. Christmas came. I spent it with my sister and her husband, who'd flown down from Eugene. We ate crab legs and watched old movies and laughed more than I had in a long time. My sister cried a little when we talked about Helen. I didn't. I'd done my crying. I was somewhere else now. In January, the Henderson and Brooke deal closed. I had become, quietly and without announcement, a significant equity partner in the firm where my son worked. My name appeared nowhere public. The agreement was structured through a holding company Patricia had recommended, clean, legal, and completely invisible to anyone who didn't know where to look. I'm telling you this not to sound clever. I'm telling you because what happened next was not something I engineered. It happened on its own, the way things sometimes do when you've been patient. In February, Becca had the baby, a girl. They named her Rosie. Travis called me from the hospital. It was 2 a.m. Phoenix time. I was awake. I'd been awake for hours, not knowing why. The way you sometimes are when something important is happening somewhere near you. "She's here," he said. His voice was different, scraped raw in a way I recognized. "She's perfect, Dad. She's so small." I listened to him talk about her for 10 minutes, the color of her hair, the way she grabbed his finger, how Becca was exhausted and relieved and already crying and laughing at the same time. I said, "Tell Becca I'm glad she's okay. Tell her she did a good job." There was a pause. "Dad," he said, "I'm sorry about Thanksgiving. I should have said something. I should have." "Travis," I said, "we don't have to do this tonight." "I know. You have a daughter," I said. "Go be with her. We'll talk." I sat in my condo for a while after I hung up. Outside, the January night was still and cold, and the city was doing what cities do in the middle of the night. It sounds muffled and distant. I thought about what I wanted. Not about what I was owed. Not about justice. Just about what I actually wanted. The answer was clearer than I'd expected. I visited Rosie for the first time when she was 4 days old. I brought flowers for Becca and a small stuffed bear I'd bought at the hospital gift shop on the way up. Becca hugged me when I walked in. A real hug, not a polite one. She looked like someone who had been through something enormous and come out the other side with her priorities rearranged. We didn't talk about Thanksgiving. We didn't need to. I held Rosie for a long time. She was small and warm, and she smelled the way all newborns smell, which is the way you never quite forget. She opened her eyes while I was holding her and seemed to look at me with the concentrated seriousness that new babies have, the look that says they're trying to figure out exactly what kind of world they've been born into. "I've got you," I told her very quietly. "Whatever happens, I've got you." That spring, a few things happened in a particular order. The first was that Henderson and Brooke landed a major contract, a public works project they'd been pursuing for years, finally awarded after a long procurement process. It was transformative for the firm. Travis called me, excited, to tell me about it. He was being promoted, Senior Director of Operations, real authority, real money. "That's great," I said. "You've earned it." I meant it. He had. He didn't know that the capital backing that had helped stabilize the firm during the lean months, the patient money that had given Henderson and Brooke the runway to stay competitive during the bidding process, had come from me. He still doesn't know that part of the story. Maybe he will someday. Maybe it doesn't matter. The second thing was a letter from my attorney, delivered to Travis on a Tuesday in April. It was a formal notification that the deed to the Tempe house was being placed in an irrevocable trust, the trust in Rosie's name, effective immediately. The house would be hers when she turned 25 outright, no conditions. Until then, Travis and Becca were welcome to continue living there as trustees of the property, at no cost for as long as they chose. The $1,800 a month they'd been paying would stop. Those payments, accumulated, were being rolled into a separate 529 account in Rosie's name, designated for her education. I did not call to explain the letter. I let it speak for itself. Travis called me that evening. I could hear in his voice that he'd been sitting with it for hours, trying to understand what he was feeling. "Dad," he said, "you didn't have to do this." "I know. The house is ours. I mean, we've been paying." "You've been paying rent," I said gently, "to your daughter's education fund. Turns out you've been better parents than you knew." There was a long silence. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" he said. "Any of it. The house. Why did you keep all of this to yourself?" I thought about how to answer that. "Because I didn't want it to change how you lived," I said. "Your choices. Your work. Whether you thought you needed to try." Another silence. Longer. "I treated you like you had nothing," he said. "You treated me the way people treat someone when they've decided they know the whole story," I said. "It happens." Dad, that's not an excuse." "No," I agreed. "It's not." We talked for a long time that night. More honestly than we'd talked in years, maybe ever. He talked about the fear that had driven the Thanksgiving conversation, the anxiety of a new baby coming, the mortgage he thought he was carrying, the sense that everything was tight and something had to give. He wasn't excusing it. He was trying to explain it, which is different, and I gave him credit for the difference. I told him about the 4 months, about Patricia, about the condo, about the decisions I'd been making quietly while they'd been misreading my silence as helplessness. He laughed once, a short, disbelieving laugh. "You were 12 minutes away this whole time." 11, I said, on a good traffic day. There's a picture on my phone now that I look at more than I probably should. It's from a Sunday in June. Travis and Becca's backyard, the backyard of the house that will someday belong to my granddaughter. There's a sprinkler running, and the afternoon light is hitting the water at that particular angle that makes everything look like it's happening inside a painting. Rosie is in Becca's arms, wearing a tiny hat with a sunflower on it. Travis is standing next to them with his hand on Becca's shoulder, squinting into the sun. I'm not in the picture. I took it. That's usually where I end up at these things, behind the camera, watching. Helen used to say I was more comfortable as a witness than a subject. She wasn't wrong. There's a kind of wealth in watching, too, if you know how to recognize it. A different kind than what Patricia manages, but real in its own way. Maybe more real. I went back to my condo that Sunday evening and made myself dinner and ate it on the balcony while the neighborhood got dark around me. The city was doing its ordinary things. Somewhere a few blocks away, someone was playing music, something low and unhurried. I thought about Helen. I thought about the pies I'd carried out of that kitchen in November. I thought about Rosie's face when she looked at me in the hospital. That serious, ancient baby stare, trying to read the world. I thought about what my son had said the night of the letter. "I treated you like you had nothing." The thing is, and this is what I want anyone listening to understand, the thing is, he wasn't entirely wrong. I did have nothing for a while. Not the financial kind of nothing, the other kind. The kind that happens when grief hollows you out and you fill the hollow with work and forward motion because you don't know what else to do. I'd had nothing in the way that matters most, and I'd built something back from it slowly, without witnesses. What my son didn't know on that Thanksgiving morning wasn't just about money. It was about what I'd survived, what I'd been quietly carrying, what a person can rebuild in silence when they decide to. He knows more of it now. Not all of it. Some things you don't hand over in a single conversation. Some things take time. But Rosie will know all of it eventually. I'm planning to write it down for her. Not as a lesson, not as a cautionary tale, just as a record. Here's who your grandfather was. Here's what he carried. Here's what he left you and why. She's 4 months old right now. She has Helen's eyes, which I noticed on day one and which I am choosing to believe is not just wishful thinking on my part. She grabs my finger with a grip that feels, improbably, like a decision. I've got her. Whatever comes, however it unfolds, I've got her, and she doesn't have to know anything yet except that. I've thought a lot about that Thanksgiving morning, the orange juice, the silk robe, my son sitting at the counter not looking at me. I've replayed it more times than I probably should. Not out of bitterness, but because I keep finding new things in it, small details that tell me something true about how life actually works. What struck me eventually was this. Travis didn't kick out a helpless old man. He kicked out a version of me that existed only in his assumptions. He'd looked at the surface. No paycheck, aging father, quiet, undemanding, and decided he knew the whole story. That's a natural thing to do. We all do it. We read people by what's visible, and we stop looking when we think we've seen enough. The consequences of that morning weren't punishment. I want to be clear about that. I didn't set out to teach anyone a lesson. What happened? The letter, the trust, the equity position at his firm. Those were decisions I'd already been building toward. Travis's choices just clarified my own. They removed a hesitation I hadn't fully admitted I had. That's how it tends to work in my experience. The things people do to us, especially the people we love, have a way of pushing us toward decisions we were already ready to make. The cause and the effect aren't always separated by drama. Sometimes they're separated by a Tuesday morning and a cup of coffee and a very quiet car ride home. What I want anyone listening to take from this story isn't about money. The money is almost beside the point. What I want you to take is something about the kind of person you're trying to become, and how you become them. You build your character in the years nobody's watching. The discipline, the restraint, the choices you make when there's no immediate reward and no audience. I spent 35 years making boring, consistent decisions while driving a truck that needed new brakes and eating at a diner where everyone knew my name. No one would have looked at me and seen wealth. That was intentional, because I'd learned the hard way, after Helen, that what you are on the inside has to be strong enough to carry you when everything outside falls apart. That's not wisdom I was born with. I built it, slowly, with a lot of failures I haven't told you about. You also build your mind, your ability to see clearly, to plan, to not react when reaction would feel satisfying but cost you everything. The morning Becca told me to leave, I felt the pull to say something. To correct the record right there in the kitchen, I didn't. Not because I was weak, because I was thinking farther ahead than that moment. Patience isn't passive. It's one of the most active choices a person can make. And then there's what I'd call the quiet kind of strength. The kind that keeps you moving when you have every reason to stop. I lost Helen. I lost the future we'd planned together. I rebuilt, alone, without anyone telling me I was doing it right. That kind of endurance isn't dramatic. It doesn't look like anything from the outside, but it's what was in the room with me when Becca handed me my pies, and it's what got me to my condo and to Patricia's phone number, and eventually to a Sunday afternoon in a backyard where my granddaughter grabbed my finger like she meant it. Travis is a good man who made a bad choice under pressure. I know that now. I knew it then, somewhere underneath the hurt. What changed between that morning and where we are now wasn't justice. It was honesty, his and mine both, and the slow, uncomfortable work of seeing each other more clearly. That's available to anyone, at any age, under any circumstances. You don't need a trust fund or a financial advisor or a deed in your name. You need the willingness to keep going, to keep thinking, to keep being the kind of person you'd want your grandchild to know about someday. Rosie is 4 months old. She doesn't know any of this yet, but I'm writing it down, and one day she will.